Okay, so we got a glimpse into the foundation of the classical model of reality through Plato's metaphysical dualism. And as you see on the slide here, I gave some examples of how this hierarchical model of reality played out in the political order or the ecclesial structure of of classical times. So the political order of a king, where a political order is mediated downwards through that hierarchy, and those at the bottom then owed particular duties or obligations to those above them. Now, there were also obligations that the aristocracy had towards the landowners and the king to the aristocracy, for instance. So there was kind of this reciprocal obligation at work in the hierarchy. But this is just an example. Of ways that this model played out. So you see it also in the Catholic Church, where God's grace is thought to be transmitted directly to the Pope and down through that hierarchy, eventually through the sacraments to the laity. So again, this is just an example of how that hierarchy might play out in actual life for the times. So we got a glimpse into the foundational of that classical model of reality through Plato's metaphysical dualism. Aristotle did not subscribe to Plato's notions of forms, or to the idea that the knowledge of the real was to be found in universals. Remember, we talked about that when we talked about Plato and universals. Instead, Aristotle wanted to pay more attention to things in the world. He called them particulars. And so the difference between particulars and universals has become a really important difference, a categorical difference in philosophical thought since then. So Aristotle thought that he could gain access to ultimate reality through particulars. One reason for this is that all particulars, he said, have a purpose, and that purpose is leading somewhere. So in Aristotle, the purposiveness of the cosmos connects us with transcendence, and that's a key point. Aristotle assumed that it, just like Plato, Aristotle assumed that it belonged to the nature of the real to appear and to do so in an orderly, moral way. And by studying the physical world, we could learn about the nature of reality, the nature of things like justice and morality and truth, because all of these particulars point beyond themselves to something higher, to something transcendent through their purpose, the purpose that they have. So it's the obvious fundamental connection to transcendence that made it nearly impossible to be an atheist prior to 1500. For Plato, it's the forms that transcend. For Aristotle, it's the purpose of things that transcend. After 1500, transcendence is replaced by a very different fundamental theme, that of freedom. No more transcendence, but a whole lot of freedom. So today, as we study Aristotle, it's important to note that it was Islamic scholars that kept Aristotle alive. Because of Plato's overwhelming significance, Aristotle had pretty much disappeared from Western thought for several centuries. So because of the Crusades, though, Aristotle was reintroduced to the West. Thomas Aquinas discovered him, and Aristotle became the philosophical basis for much of Thomistic thought. So other than Augustine, who relied on Plato and Plotinus, no one has had as much influence on the Roman Catholic Church as had Aquinas. Now notice how both of these seminal theologians, Augustine and Aquinas, relied on seminal philosophers to develop and to articulate their theology. Does this surprise us? I don't think it should, because just as the Son of God became incarnate, so the revelation of God always comes to us in the form of thought, the body of thought, that we can most easily interact with. The challenge is trying not to nail the essence of divine revelation down to that particular mode of revelation. Don't turn the mode of revelation into the content of revelation. Now, this is really, really hard not to do, as we learned in our spiritual reflections back in week 1. And if you're wondering which philosopher influenced John Wesley, the answer is John Locke. Which philosopher will influence your theology or spirituality?